walk through the nooks and crannies of the Wee Hoose?
I left out the body.
Okay, that's good.
Some
We'll
editing.
ignore the body parts then, okay? All right.
The body was implied.
The body part?
You got
B-O-D
it,
or B-O-U-D?
Yeah. Take your pick. I can't spell anymore, so. No, my objectives, I tried to make some down here. It's to partly make it clear how much we need volunteers to carry on with things. And take a peek at some of the lesser known treasures and secrets of this storehouse of goodies, and how we've managed to survive so far with people, most of whom aren't around right now, but they did a lot to get us to this point, and maybe it'll be entertaining as well. So we're starting here, and I realized the Irreverent and Reverend are very similar, and you could, and you would have, in the early 70s, been pointed over here, and there was a minister living here. Across the Common, there was another minister living over there, and of course we had Arnold Brown in the church here. And we have a very entertaining bunch of letters written to various people, some cases each other, that refers to their strong feelings about whether or not the banjo and the fiddlers contest was appropriate for a little place like this. They had the misfortune of being right in the front door of this thousands of people on that summer day. And I can't read them all, but I have them, as I have other things, on a table inside. And if we have time, we can read them, or you can look them over on your own time, and I think you'll find them just pretty amazing that they didn't try and strangle each other on this issue. But of course, you know that was a big part of the summer activities back then, and if any of you have recollections about things that you want to share as we go through, just sing out, and we'll add you to the.
Well, the whole thing was begun by Arnold, one of the
Yeah.
right, one of the ministers.
One of the ministers, and I don't have a letter from Arnold, but you'd imagine what his feelings were about things. But Everett Babcock here, and we had, of course, Reverend Winterstein over here, and those letters are in our files under fiddlers/banjo contest stuff. So we're here, and I am going to mention something about Reverend Babcock, as I've heard from Harry Miller. Of course, Babcock, he died in 1984. He'd been in poor health for a while before that. And Harry Miller, doing his work around here, and he did some work for various people, often ran into him in the morning, and Reverend Babcock usually had a drink in his hand, and I checked with Harry on this, and he said that, basically Reverend Babcock did drink a little bit because it made him feel better. He was really in pain and not feeling good, and that was his way of coping with his health issues.
What did he drink?
I didn't ask that question, and I'm not sure Harry would have known either. But that's, who could we ask? I don't know. But he also had a habit of making Harry laugh because Everett knew a lot of bawdy jokes. And he used to tell a couple of dirty jokes in the morning just to get fired up there and survive the rest of the day.
I had no idea.
So, well, I don't, knowing him as I did, I never would have expected that either. But and here's where we segue way back to something we have dated 1900 that was mailed to a member of the town officers. It's called List of Ministers Turned Out. And it's a bunch, it's hard to read the scribbling, but it's a name, it's the town and the church, and it was the indiscretion that got him booted out of his church. And I think almost or more, just slightly more than half of them were for adultery. There was also murder. There was misuse of funds. There was, oh boy, 2 or 3 other little things, but by far. So things could have been a lot worse. No matter what our ministers have done, had a drink or two, it could have been worse. And, Everett, of course, was far from that sort of mindset. So bless his soul. Is there anything you see around here from this viewpoint that you want to ask about? And I'm not going to give you a history of the Wee Hoose or anything, but any part of this scene. If not, we'll move on, and we're going to go into the Babcock room right here and carry on and see what we can find.
It's just the right size group.
It's the true believers.
Yeah.
That's for greasy hair, right? Yeah, okay. By all means.
And for sitting on there, it's for greasy.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else as well? I don't think I have a lot of grease on me then.
Well, if you've been here before, you probably have heard that this focuses on the family of Mary Jean Simpson and Miss Jean Simpson and all the other relatives of whom Reverend Babcock was a relative also. They were cousins. And so Ann Wilson put the labels on these, but these are pictures of Babcocks and all sorts of members of the big clan of Simpsons. And I'm trying to get anything that relates to Simpsons in terms of letters and stuff and get them into this room if I can fill this little cabin. Come on in, come on in. Hello.
Hi there, hi, sweetie.
And
Because with Poppy.
I'm going to go back over here.
Is this
And
possible to-
I know
is
the
this
light's
legal?
not good, but
Is it legal to sit on the
Yeah.
yep, go ahead.
Just don't try and get on the couch.
I don't know if I dare. I'm not going to take it out, but some of you may know that, of course, the Craftsbury Historical Society got started in 1977 or so, and that's the year that Mary Jean Simpson died. And the very beginnings of our collection and our historical stuff derives to a great extent from Mary Jean Simpson's effects. And Everett and his wife Hannah were the executors of her estate. And so I found myself the grunt who had to go into the house and up and down into the attic and decide what we should keep that was historically, important to the town of Craftsbury. And of course, you never know until you start looking through things more carefully. And I've certainly read through probably all of these at one point, and in some cases they're still wrapped up, so all these letters right here came from a certain friend of Mary Jean Simpson, and so on and so forth. And they are and were fascinating reading. There were diaries also, and the diaries of Mary Jean Simpson came here. Everett and Hannah looked them over, and they decided that it was a little too personal to have them, on public display, and so they hung on to them, and they ended up going to a woman named Sally Fisher, who was a friend and an historian in Greensboro, and I understand that they have since moved to, I think, the Vermont Historical Society, but they're in a place where they're safe, and I suppose you could probably read them. It's been a few years since that, but But she was quite a person, and we're not going to go through her life. But during her career, she was worked at UVM. She was a dean of women for a long time. And while there, you know, you pick up a piece of paper and you start looking at it. And here's a application to join the Navy by somebody. That somebody is George Frederick Dunbar, whoever he is. And you get the formal sheet of paper, and then you get a letter from George Simpson, and then you get a reply from Mary Jean Simpson. And they didn't see eye to eye, and I have no idea whether this man got in the Navy. He did not get her recommendation. And there were some probably just unfortunate misunderstandings. But this is George. This is he's writing back to Miss Simpson. I have known you all my life, personally and otherwise, and they did live very close together. And even when others have criticized you and called you narrow-minded, petty, and self-righteous, I was inclined to feel that their criticisms were unjust. I'm sorry that I must now revalue my opinion. And he goes and he digs and he pokes around a little bit more. Mary Jean gives it back to him in a much more ladylike fashion. But in fact, she says, well, you're on your own, you idiot. You dropped out of school. You presumed I'm going to give you a great recommendation, and you've disappointed all your professors at college and whatever. So George didn't get his wish, not from Mary Jean Simpson anyway. That's fun to read.
Yeah.
And they're not all that interesting, but there are tons of letters and artifacts, paper stuff, and we get, since the two women, Mary Jean Simpson and Miss Jean Simpson, were cousins, a lot of this stuff also belongs to Miss Jean Simpson. So this is sort of like the Simpson room.
Are they all labeled in there, so?
Only as far as I got, and then it may say letters from so-and-so. And for somebody who wanted to do more research on the two Simpson cousins, this would be a treasure trove. And I'll make a reference, if I can remember it, about this issue of borrowing stuff to do research. And somebody did.
Of
So,
course, and nobody writes letters anymore, so they're, in that respect, they're so
Yeah.
valuable.
yeah.
How close were they in age?
I think they were.
Mary Jean was a little younger, but she died earlier than Miss Jean. 1981, Miss Jean maybe, and 1977, Mary Jean. So these are all artifacts from her, basically from her family. This portrait right here was given to the Historical Society. It's a portrait of Hannah Babcock, Everett's, and for years, ever since we labeled it, there's Hannah and there's her younger sister by 2 years. Well, a couple years ago, maybe it's not that long, some of the family, descendants came in here and they said, you got that wrong. There's Hannah over here.
She's a younger?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
So we have somebody working on putting a new sign that's accurate. And
Who's
it's
the
not
son?
just here that we have some inaccuracies, but as we learn of them, we're going to straighten them out.
Who's
So,
the someone you have?
let's see.
And who's the portrait painter?
Well, if you want to read all about that, there's a little description about the whole business.
I mean, it's
but,
not the Chandler.
yeah. No. This is much later anyway.
Right, but not a Chandler
So,
descendant.
but there was some pretty high power guy here for a while. That's Rodin, and he did.
You did a bust for
Did
them?
a bust of
He was here in Craftsbury?
John W. Simpson.
He was in East Craftsbury.
Yeah, East
Yeah.
Craftsbury.
He came to visit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or he came on assignment?
He came to visit. He was friend John W. Simpson, Mary Jean's uncle. Knew him. I mean, he was a businessman, and somehow or another they got together, and they had been up here before.
Wow.
So that's his work, and in fact, I remember that up in the closet on the third floor when I went through
The actual
Mary Jean's.
marble sculpture or whatever?
Right.
Right.
Wow, I wonder what happened to it.
We didn't take that. We weren't allowed to at that time.
I didn't
Where is
know
it
that.
now? Still in the house?
I don't know, but there were a number of auctions of Miss Jean's
Hmm.
effects that took care of a lot of the things that were of real significant value. So that's what we've got there.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
never heard that story.
So I think, yeah, again, if you have a question or anything, just sing out. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving.
So what, did Rodin have a commission when he was over here, or he just came to visit?
No, I think he just came to visit.
Yeah.
It was a social call, but he did this bust, and there's the photo of it. And I don't know if there's a date on this, but 1909. Madame K. Simpson's. Oh, it's in French. No wonder I can't read it.
There we
Would you
go,
like
Don,
to, would
it's
you like
all
to read this? Can you read it? I think it's French.
Madame K. Simpson, hommage affectueux.
What are those last two words?
Hommage,
Paying homage?
Honor.
Honor.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
affectionate
Praise.
praise,
Yeah.
affectionate praise.
See?
And
You
then,
like that.
So it's dedicated with it.
I don't know what the last part is though.
Well, it's his signature there.
Yeah, but
yeah.
there's something,
We need a flashlight.
Yeah, we need lights.
That's really cool.
All right, let's go in here.
All right.
that is cool, I didn't know there was a Rodin in here.
I've said it.
All right.
I remember hearing something.
They also had a famous photographer, Steichen or Stieglitz, I would say.
Steichen, yeah.
Steichen.
Yeah, Steichen, yeah.
Steichen was
Steichen,
here
you're
also.
right. That's
Famous,
right.
same.
And we don't have- Oh, we do have some photographs of Miss Jean Simpson.
Yes, I
That were
remember.
Steichen, yes.
Right, we
Right.
saw those the time there was the.
And I don't know where if we have them, I'm not sure where, but, yeah, we're getting tinier rooms, bigger crowd. Yeah, well, we don't have to stay here too long. This is sort of the crafts room. A lot of this relates to the Crafts family, and then most of these pictures or what have you refer in some way or another to early settlers. And I'm just going to point out that you are, what's your name?
Silly?
Oh, nice to meet you. I heard about you. Behind Vasily is
Ta-da, Vasily.
there. I'm trying to get all the obviously crafts stuff, whatever it is, letters, whatever, into one file cabinet collection here.
Wow,
So that
that's
if
a
somebody
job.
says, do you know anything about crafts? I can say right there and get
That's
started.
too cool.
It's not been sorted properly, but we gotta hope that someday that'll happen. Down at the very bottom, there are some glass photography
Plates
Oh, some
yeah,
old plates.
plates, and they're the oldest photographs that we have here. And Don's done an awful lot here with photos, and anything that, if you remember way back when Jerry Spalding used to put out photographs on Old Home Day, Don's got the negatives, we've got them all filed away, and so we're getting really good with lots of photographs anyway. Ann Wilson isn't here today, but we would applaud her for the effort she put in to make a couple of these big displays, because when they had the Vermont history,
At Tunbridge Fair.
Tunbridge Fair, Vermont History
State Expo.
Expo.
History Expo,
Yeah, we participated a number of years, and this is sort of typical of what Ann Wilson was able to put together with her skills. And it, you know, kind of pinpoints interesting parts of the crafts family, which if you really get into it, there's an awful lot of tragedy in that family. Suicides and madness and all sorts of things. As you move up towards modern day, it didn't stop with just founding family, but the offspring. And we're not going to get into that. But we've got a lot of stuff relating to the Crafts family, obviously, and, as we should, because they're our founding family, if you will. I've got a photo over here that he is sort of a member of the Crafts family, and his name, they call him Dr. Charlie. How about that? Were you named after him? No, okay.
No, well, you know,
Sort of, yeah.
Maybe.
I was named after,
Oh, okay, yeah,
Charles.
we've got, yeah, there's all sorts of, this is an awful lot of stuff to look at if you have never been there before. But just sticking with odd, funny stories. He was a doctor, an MD, and he was well liked in here, but according to a couple of the descendants, Aunt Mary Dustin and her niece, at one point Dr. Charlie dropped in, sat down there, and he looked at the sugar bowl over there, and he took the sugar bowl lid off, and he grabbed a spoon, and he take it right off the spoon and licked it off, and he put the spoon right back into the sugar bowl. Which at the time, well, maybe he didn't know about, you know, germs and transfer, but it was kind of casual about, you know, obvious things that we take for granted now. But he served the community for a long time, as prior to that did his father. So,
And his office was over where Sterling Simpson Hall is.
No, let's see, okay, Doc Easton.
Oh, that was East, oh,
Doc Easton, okay.
different doctor, okay.
There are two things that I keep running across ideas for people to do research on. The doctors in their lives here, because they were a big part of society, and the photographers who took the pictures, including the glass plate negatives right up to, you know, yesterday. And there, you know, I can list 3 or 4 of them that are pretty significant. And but I know very little about them as people, and you know, just the basic: who were they, where did they live, you know, when were they born, family. We have proof that one doctor died of morphinism. He was a morphine addict, I guess. I mean, a photographer, excuse me, photographer. Little tiny tickets. Let's see, Dr. Charlie, okay. Now, going out here, we got some closets and doors. This is full of clothing, right there. This is full of photographs and photo albums. The light, let me see if I can get the light on here.
Who did this painting?
There we go.
It's a very,
Yes, it works, it works.
yeah.
Okay. We won't be here very long, but just note that, again, we're trying to concentrate our photographs, and they're not just albums, but a lot of these come from a certain family. You see Dustin a lot, for good reason. But there are other families who gave us the photos
but
that
would
were
be
part
good
of
maybe.
their family, and we've got them, and it's overwhelming. Some of this aren't photographs yet, but I'd like to move these out. These are old account books, and we'll just keep working on the photos specifically here. But it's overwhelming, but someday we'll get it all sorted out with help. With help. All right, we're in the big room. Oh, yeah. All right.
Wouldn't that be a cool show?
So a lot of the portraiture and paintings are they itinerant type people or
You mean the photographers? or
photographers and some of the portrait paintings and things like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's
if
what I
it's-
meant.
There were a couple of towns, Barton, bigger towns, if anybody needed a high school, picture for the yearbook, they go up there. So we have boxes of what I call framed photos. And then there are the very casual family photos, and everything in between.
There was a
There's
photographer
something downstairs I'll show you that is just overwhelming when you look at it.
in Hardwick too. There were photographers.
Yeah, when I first came to Craftsbury, I
Yeah.
can't remember the name, but she used to go to whatever.
Zecchinelli.
Zecchinelli, yeah, that was it, yeah. Well, this is, we sort of called it for years, or have called it the new room. I think Bob Twist is going to have his name up here in honor of his, long life and connections with early settlers. I won't go into details, but Bob, lived right down here, and he was a great friend of the Historical Society. So we're going to dedicate this room to him. But it's part of a big change in the Wee Hoose that happened around the turn of 2000 or so. And that's a long story about the evolution of the change here from a tiny little summer cottage to something that could be heated in the winter if we want to do it. And if we get back and we're still interested, this is stuff that's germane in some way or another to what I might talk about, or maybe just touched upon, and you're welcome to look this over. And it's a variety of things I can dispense. Some of this I will, I think I'm going to wait for most of this stuff, because we're going to go downstairs, and then we're going to come back upstairs, and we're going to end up here, and I will sort of bring this stuff to life, I think. And
Dave, I'm just looking at my battery. Why don't you just go through this first before my battery runs out?
okay, all right. One of the descendants of the Crafts family was named Margaret Hazen Muller. She worked at UVM, and this is her contribution to Craftsbury history, of which she was very familiar because she was a direct descendant of the Crafts, the other side, right? But it's all about George Washington Henderson. And the point I'm going to make is that she did a lot of research and tracked down the travels of this young black boy, man, to northern Vermont with the help of a captain in the Civil War, a Union soldier who saw a lot of promise in him.
He's a genius.
He went to UVM, Phi Beta Kappa. He had a long life. Some of it, a good bit of it, was spent right here in Craftsbury. He was the principal of the Craftsbury Academy for two different things. He married a white woman. She had a child. Unfortunately, the child died. She died as well. But there's nothing anyone's ever seen that was derogatory about this really brilliant man. But what's happened is that now, maybe Margaret Hazen Muller got the wrong guy to bring him up, and now we have two benefactors of George Washington Henderson. What she surmised, Underhill, Vermont, certain name, and now we got another one up in Belvedere, who's probably the right person who really brought Henderson up here. And they are now at the point where they're trying to figure out where to put a historical marker about him. And I was contacted because, in fact, there's no better place to have a historical marker than Craftsbury, because he taught here a number of years. He's responsible for sort of getting the new Craftsbury Academy built after the other one burned. His wife and child are buried in the cemetery as well.
He also started the school library.
He did, yeah, you did some research on him, didn't you? Yeah. Well, he was quite the person. So I don't know how it's going to sugar off, but there may well be another historical marker somewhere on the Common besides what's here already. That would be somewhat ironic. But, so Margaret Hazen Muller's efforts, they were great, but they may have to be revised a little bit. If you want to really get a sense of what life was like in Craftsbury about 1884, there's nothing better than George Sprague's diary. This is the original diary, and he was a fascinating guy. And there's something in here I could read typical of him, but the wit and wisdom of this guy is amazing. Again, we've had people come by and donate their time and their talents to make a full copy, not just of the handwritten 1983 diary, but what was typed prior to that by somebody that worked at Sterling College years ago. And so we have two diaries, both of them fascinating, and you could spend a lifetime, figuring out who all these people were. And check the library and look it over, and if you want more detail, I can give you a lot more, because we have a big box of stuff that brings this to life with pictures and photographs.
Where did he live, Dave?
He lived up on Denton, on Denton Hill Road, right where Denton's house is. That had burned years ago, but we've got photographs of his house. There's one tree stump from the original